This week on Crunchweek, we're talking about investor demand for Bitcoin, Foursquare's new funding, and the Google Glass Collective. Welcome to Crunchweek. I'm Leena Rao.
I'm Colleen Taylor.
And I'm Anthony Ha.
We're talking this week about a lot of really exciting stories. First up is Bitcoin and the investor demand this week. Like, there are all these sort of articles that came out. I feel like that just, Bitcoin is like the new rage, especially amongst investors.
I know. We talked about it a couple weeks ago here on Crunchweek, and we were just like, oh, this is bubbling up here. They hit a high. This is a couple weeks long buzz, and it keeps going on. But super volatile Bitcoin market. What I'd be interested to know, and I think this is a story that I should work on for the future or something, but how does this compare to other currencies in forming countries? Like, when the Soviet Union broke up and each one of those countries gained back its own currency, were those being gamed crazily by, outside, not hackers, but I guess people who wanted to capitalize on it? I mean, how typical is this for a new currency? In my lifetime, I don't know that I've really been sentient enough to know when a new currency is being formed and how normal this is.
Right, and well, especially, since we're all in the States, so just dealing with the dollar mostly, which hasn't been. But I do think it certainly undercuts, a lot of, I think that it's definitely something where just the press in general is kind of wrestling, and everyone, but especially the press, I think, is just wrestling with the significance of it, and especially that the initial stuff was about sort of, this new safe currency, which now seems obviously a little laughable.
Well, I think it's really interesting because I feel like investors are actually really kind of creating this demand. Like, they're tweeting about it. They're talking to reporters, including our own Kim Cutler, who wrote an amazing piece about the investor demand. I mean, everyone's just so excited about it, and I still don't really get it, though. Like, I mean, it's like they're, I don't know. I feel like they're creating this demand, and they're going to invest, and then it's like this bubble is going to pop.
Although I wonder if that to a certain extent it seems also Bitcoin has been around for a few years, and it seems like also something that is like an overnight success that was actually years in the making. That it's sort of been happening sort of parallel to or separate from Silicon Valley, and then suddenly everyone's kind of catching on, and now it just feels like it's turning into this crazy hype cycle, but actually it's been around for a while, which doesn't mean that now the hype isn't sort of overstated. It just means that it's, I think there was something there before, and maybe some of that volatility is indicating sort of a correction, but it's not like there's nothing, there was nothing there before.
Yeah, and historically, this is how we see big trends often emerging, at least in Silicon Valley or the tech world. It's kind of, the phone freakers back in the 60s and 70s were super weird, guys, and now, coding and stuff is so mainstream, and Bitcoin, it was fun. If you haven't read Kim Mai's article, you should, because it's amazing. Just kind of drilling into a lot of these people who have been part of Bitcoin for the past 4 years are just such wacky characters in so many ways. My favorite, it's there are sentences the son of Patagonian sheep ranchers who, it's all these people who do these really interesting things, and they're also hyper smart and interested in Bitcoin. So this could stick around.
Yeah, a lot to, I guess, still be determined. I want to go on to Foursquare's new funding.
Right,
which has been reported for a while now, but actually confirmed this week.
Right. Yeah. I think probably for the past year or so. I mean, and there may be some of those past reports are maybe not necessarily about this specific funding, but just when they're sort of in talks and looking at funding, and I mean, it's kind of hard to tell at this point, but they did announce $41 million in new funding this week, and I think. I think one of the angles that we took with our coverage was that this kind of helps quiet some of the speculation and criticism about Foursquare, which, a few years ago was definitely one of these things that seemed like, the hottest startup, and I think the excitement around it has kind of diminished a little bit. So clearly this gives it a little bit of runway to kind of continue to figure out the business model.
Well, I think we have to be careful when we say funding, because it's convertible debt. It's they have to pay this back.
Round.
Yeah, this is not an equity round, and so it does quiets some things, but then at the same time, it.
Well, there's a lot of speculation that they didn't want to. There was the rumor that they were going to have to take a down round, which is like a lower valuation than they had past raised for, and so the speculation is that they didn't want to do that and chose to take the debt. But we'll see what happens. I guess when that converts, if they do raise another round after that, we'll see.
Yeah, all eyes are on Foursquare.
Yeah, but
sure.
there's a great piece I think Malik wrote about sort of in support of Foursquare, because a lot of people have come down on them, and especially the CEO and founder Dennis Crowley. But they still provide value, and they're trying, and it's all about the entrepreneurial spirit, even if you are this far in.
Right. I mean, there's definitely, that's certainly no guarantee that they'll succeed, but I think there is this like kind of weird Schadenfreude when like a really really hot startup kind of hits, what is arguably, sort of an inevitable rough patch. I mean, assuming you don't get acquired in the first couple of years, and again, who knows what is actually going to happen, but like the fact that they're, like having some issue, that they seem to not necessarily be growing sort of as dramatically and seem not to have completely figured out the business model yet does not seem to be a reason to like completely be like, oh, haha, like Foursquare.
Do you use it? Do either of you use it?
No.
All my location check-ins are on Path now.
Yeah.
But it bears mention that it's Foursquare's data that powers the
Right.
location things
That's
on
right.
Path and on a bunch of other apps. And so I guess I do use Foursquare technology.
Right.
Right.
Maybe there's a good business model there, and they'll figure that out.
Right. And so, and one of the things that they do talk about when they talk about their funding is that they are working with about 50 kind of big advertisers right now, and sort of the next challenge is kind of the trying to figure out how do they sort of take that model and then like also get like all the other businesses who are on Foursquare, who are like offering specials on Foursquare to actually like spend money on it. And again, that's I think what they're trying to figure out.
My favorite part though that you can't kind of dial down the snark when in the Business Week article, which is where they announced the funding exclusively, was Dennis Crowley said, I think that now we just have the time to prove that there's a real business here. It's like, you guys raised hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
And I know that that's not what he meant
Right.
and all this stuff, but everyone jumped on that, and you can't not jump on that
course.
because that just, all the hype and everything, it's that Schadenfreude.
Yeah, and I mean some of it. I don't think like having some of that like bring it down to earth is okay. It's just I think the way, and I mean this is the way any internet discussion goes, but the way it kind of turns into like a pylon, I think feels a little bit over the top.
It does. It definitely does. Well, speaking of funding, I want to talk about the new Google Glass Collective, which launched this week. It's basically a consortium between Google Ventures, Andreessen Horowitz, and Kleiner Perkins, three of sort of these big Silicon Valley VC firms, basically coming together to create a fund to support just applications built off of the Google Glass API. I think they had this big announcement where Sergey Brin was there, and Bill Maris of Google Ventures, Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, and John Doerr of Kleiner Perkins all sort of came around in their Google Glass finery.
I'm just trying to stifle a laugh because every time I think of that photo of the three of them, like maybe we'll put it on the screen or something. It's really funny. I mean, it still looks goofy in a way.
Right. I mean, it's also the thing about I mean, they all look like like reasonably like laid, but there is like a certain element of like when people try to look at least somewhat cool and they don't look cool.
No,
that
like
juxtaposition
Sergey
is what makes it
Brin
great.
Sergey Brin on the subway wearing the Google Glass looked cool. Like
Right,
I don't know about this.
Right. This was, because they're all wearing their collared shirts, and it just it looks a little bit silly.
Well, I think it's interesting. Our colleague Drew Olnoff went to the event, and he was, in his piece that he wrote up, he said that when they were talking about this, I think Maris maybe called Andreessen and Doerr, they were like automatically like, yes, we're in. They were just really, really excited about this. And, I don't know a tremendous amount. I mean, there's still so much to be learned about the actual technology, but my understanding and my hope is they know more, and there's something about this that they really feel like will be a new device that we'll all be using at some point, and certainly with applications too.
Right. I think one of the parallels that people also talk about is with Kleiner's iFund, which launched right around the time that the iPhone launched. But I think that it seems kind of different in the sense that I think up until now I had assumed that especially this initial version of Glass wasn't really going to be a mass consumer technology. It was kind of kind of a proof of concept that then people can buy and stuff, but like not that it was sort of leading the way, and you'd sort of see more sort of consumer technologies further down the line. And I mean that could still be the case here. This is they're just trying to get ahead of the curve now, and you're not going to see a big successful Google Glass startup right away. But I thought that was interesting that they're starting to make a bet on it earlier than maybe I would have expected.
Right. Yeah. What do you think?
I'm no thoughts. No thoughts. I'm not sure, but again, I'm like Anthony. I'm sometimes a late adopter to things, and
I do think though, like there's a coolness factor to wear. Like despite the photo, I think I'll buy one just to like kind of have it, and it's kind of like the iPad was in the beginning. Like I bought it not really knowing whether or not I was going to be using it that much, but just because it seemed like a cool gadget, and I know that I'll probably do the same. Whether it will turn into the iPad is very different.
Right, except that it's more expensive than an iPad.
It is,
or
yeah.
a laptop.
Okay.
So that would be like a special birthday present.
Right.
That.
Well, on that note, thank you for joining us for Crunch Week this week, and tune in next week.